Who would have thought Netflix would have given me something that I've been asking from Marvel for the longest time? An all-black team of X-Men. And welcome to my Safe Gayven, everybody. Thank you guys so much for joining me for another video here on the Black Gay Comic Geek channel. But if this is your first video and the first time checking out my channel, let me introduce myself. My name is Michael. I call myself the Black Gay Comic Geek and always say the things I love to talk about on my channel is a combination of blood, sex, gore, and magic, or any variation of the force. I like to talk about fantasy. I like to talk about sci-fi, superheroes, action movies. And of course, I like to talk about black representation and queer representation. More times than not, the lack thereof in sci-fi, fantasy, TV shows and movies, video games, comic books, etc. But if you think representation matters, if you think representation equals normalization, if you like the videos, if you like the content, if you like the personality, do me a favor, help me to continue to grow this channel by hitting that subscribe button. Also, you can help me grow this channel by hitting the like button. It'll help with the YouTube algorithm, getting this video out there, getting my channel out there. Hopefully I'm interesting enough for you to watch the entire video for the watch time. That also boosts the video in the algorithm. Even if you're not interested, just let it play in the background while you're in the bathroom or whatever. But with that said, guys, we are here to talk about the latest show to hit Netflix that I feel like not enough people are talking about, that I need more people to talk about because, spoiler alert, I do want there to be a season 2, so that already tells you that I enjoyed this series, and it is called Supercell, written, created, and I think directed, I'm not sure if he directed it, but written, created by, I think he's like a British rapper. I don't know, but his name is Rap Man, so I'm assuming he's a rapper. But it is currently sitting at a 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. And so let's get into it. This is going to be a non-spoiler review. And so let's get into the synopsis of Supercell. In South London, a group of normal people suddenly develop superpowers, and the only apparent connection between them is that they're all black. As they deal with the impact of their powers on their daily lives, one man must bring them together to stop a harrowing future that he witnessed. And so, yeah, as I mentioned in the synopsis, this show takes place in South London. A lot of the actors and characters live in South London. And like, this show is basically heroes with black people in a lot of its premise. And as a matter of fact, in the premise alone of only black people having superpowers, it's actually the very same premise of this book right here called Black by Kwanzaa Oseyefo. If you haven't read or heard of or checked out Black, I definitely recommend you check that out. Support your black comic book creators. And of course, the story is vastly different, but the main premise of only black people having superpowers is basically the same as this and Supercell, except Black, the comic, takes place in New York and Supercell takes place in South London. And the reason and the explanation that they give of why only black people have superpowers is actually really interesting. Like, you think about the fact that you have a disease called sickle cell anemia, which mostly affects black people. Well, now instead of sickle cell, and there's a mutation of sickle cell where you have a super cell. And that's not fully a spoiler in terms of like the shows. Like I said, it's a non-spoiler review, but I thought that was really interesting. And my dumb ass, like when I watched the show and it was called Supercell, I originally thought it was gonna be like a prison cell for superheroes, like a super cell, but no, it's an actual, like, your cells are super, like in you know, black slang, instead of super, it's super, so it's a super cell that's in your body. And I thought that was an interesting premise because yes, there are a lot of black people that do suffer with sickle cell anemia. And so to take that and to say that that can be your superpower as well, I thought that was interesting. And this show is only like 6 episodes. It's a quick binge. Honestly, I feel like it was only 6 episodes because Netflix didn't have any faith in this show. They didn't trust it because most seasons are at least like 8 episodes. So I feel like they could have given this 8 episodes. But on the flip side of that, this is one of those rare shows and rare moments that you have 6 episodes And I feel like they told a complete story from beginning to end. I didn't feel like, oh, like granted, obviously I still wanted to have more episodes, you know, by the end of the series, but it didn't feel like, oh man, like, oh, if they would have had one more episode or two more episodes, it would have been perfect. Like me, because I enjoyed it so much, I wanted the more episodes, 8, 9, 10, etc. episodes, but they made the 6 episodes work in the show. And going back to the premise of it basically being heroes, but with black people, like literally, like even in the premise, like you have the one character who is played by Tosin Cole, and this man is fine. Like the actor, I was just like, goddamn, like he is fine. His character, his name is Michael, like me, and he basically has the powers of Hiro Nakamura. And if you haven't watched Heroes, I definitely recommend you check out Heroes, but only watch season 1. Season 1 is the only one that matters, because after that, the show just goes straight to hell. Like, in terms of like the quality. Every other season after season 1, and granted, I know people say they blame the writer's strike for that. And yes, that is also true, but there were other shows during that time that were affected during the writer's strike, and they were still good. Like Supernatural season 3 was affected by the writer's strike, and that season was still good. Season 4 was still good. Season 5 was still good, but seasons 2, 3, and 4 of Heroes, I was just like, what happened to the show? But basically, you had a character in Heroes named Hiro Nakamura, who is Japanese, and he had the power to basically, he had time powers. He could teleport through time and space. He could travel to the present, past, and future. And that's basically what the character of Michael has. And so in discovering his abilities, he ends up going and traveling to the future. And then he realized that the future is not good, basically. There's an almost apocalyptic like future, and he realizes that he has to go back and try to stop it. And by going back, he has to gather these other group of heroes to help try to stop the future that he saw. That's basically the same premise that happened with Heroes. You know, save the cheerleader, save the world. And I will say, like, getting into the very first episode, like, it does take a little bit for it to really get started. Like, the first episode is a little slow, at least for me. Like, there were certain moments in the first episode because it takes a while for them to get to the point where they discover their powers and we actually get into the plot and the main plot and storyline of the series. And it's not really until like maybe a good 45 minutes into the first episode, because every episode is about an hour-ish, but it's not until you really get to like the first like 45 minutes of the episode that it really gets into the whole superhero aspect of the show, because you're following all these characters and their lives before they got their powers, and then you're finding out what happens after, and then what the main premise of the show is. And so because it takes so long to get started, like, not to say I was bored, but it did take a little bit for me to like really get invested. And it wasn't until like towards the end of the first episode that I was like, oh, okay, I'm in. Before I was just like I was browsing my phone, I wasn't really paying attention. I was just like, what is like, but so I would say for me and for other people that end up maybe being like me, I definitely say like the first episode is a little bit of a chore to get through, but after you get through that, then I was fully invested after that. Now, also the thing about this show that I was a little disappointed in, I did enjoy this show overall, but you know, my motto is always make it blacker, make it gayer. My name is BlackGayComicGeek. I am both black and gay, so I always want black representation and queer representation, but as a black gay comic geek, as a person that loves fantasy, sci-fi, and I even kind of said this in the intro, a lot of times I find myself seeking black representation, gay representation, queer representation. Very rarely do I get the intersectionality of both. This is one of those instances where I do not get the intersectionality of both. Unfortunately, there are no queer characters in any of the ensemble in this show, so I was a little disappointed about that. None of the characters are queer. So I was just like, all right, but I still at least got my black representation. I still enjoyed the show for that. And so with that, because the premise and the show is very similar to Heroes, and you know, and in some ways it's things you've seen before, it's also things you haven't seen before, because it's characters and actors and circumstances revolving these characters that you haven't seen before on screen, language and black terminology and slang and etc. that you haven't seen before, aside of, you know, London you know, with it taking place in South London that you haven't seen before. And so that's what makes this show important. And so because of that, these characters are pretty interesting. I really enjoy and dialed into these characters. And also the thing that I really enjoyed about this show is at the heart of this story is that it is following the romance between Michael, the main character, and his love interest, Dion. Not a male Dion, like I said, there's no queer characters, but a woman Dion. And it's a black-on-black romance at the heart of this story, which is something that you don't often get in fantasy specifically, because a lot of times, like, you'll get black representation, but their love interest is always somebody white. Not even another person of color, not even like Indian or Asian. It's always black, or rather, it's always, when it comes to interracial relationships, it's always white and black. White and Asian, white and Latin. They always got to inject some level of whiteness. And yeah, in this show, they do have white characters in here, but they're not the main characters. They're not the focus of the show. They're not the ones that are driving the narrative. Well, I guess technically some of them are, but they're not really the ones that are driving the story, which I appreciate, because a lot of times, even when you look at like X-Men, et cetera, like, black people like hanging out with each other. Not to say that black people don't have white friends. I have white friends, like, but like, most of my friends are black. And like, when you think of somebody like Storm, you barely see her interacting or going out and having like a spa day or whatever with other black women in the X-Men. There are other black women mutants, but you don't really get to see Storm hanging out with other black women, or black women superheroes like Monica Rambeau, Misty Knight, etc. Or that's why I always say, like, why is there not a black team of X-Men? Why is there not a black team of Avengers? Why is there not an all queer team of superheroes? Because that just makes sense. Like, you want to be around people that also have your beliefs and same likes and wants, et cetera, et cetera. And again, it's not to say that, like, me as a gay person, that I only hang around other gay, like, honestly enough, interesting enough, most of my friends are straight, but that also doesn't mean I don't have a decent amount of gay friends as well. And so, but even with that, them all being straight, most of my friends are black. So why aren't there black superhero teams? Like, even like something like The Walking Dead. I'm getting off topic, but it all correlates in terms of like why this show is different and why it makes it, even though the premise is similar to a lot of shows, like I mentioned Heroes, or even like the Black comic book and X-Men, etc. Like, even though the premise is similar, it's different in the sense of, like, even like The Walking Dead, you had your black characters, but for the most part, they didn't even interact with each other. You never had like the black women characters, like Sasha and Michonne, the only two black women on the show. They never really checked on each other or anything like that. The black characters never really hung out and checked in on each other and like made sure everybody was good in the circumstances of being in this apocalyptic world. No, the black characters will only really, for the most part, interact with the white characters. And it's like, for the most part, that's not that realistic. And that's not to say all black people like each other or all black people are friends with each other or whatever. It's like, no, but like, we'd at least make an attempt. We'd at least check in on each other. We'd at least, you know, acknowledge each other. And you don't really see that in a lot of like these media. That's why it was such a groundbreaking moment in like the Arrowverse and the crossover where like Black Lightning saw Diggle and he gave him like the head nod, and like the internet flipped out, because you don't really see that type of acknowledgement or anything like that in these type of shows. And also, an important factor in terms of like the representation of it, and it's something I actually just thought of, because I'm like thinking about what I wore or what I'm wearing right now. You see that I'm wearing a shirt, a fan art shirt that from Black Panther, where Killmonger looks at Angela Bassett's Queen Ramonda and he says, "Hey, Auntie." And the thing that's important with this show, like, it's been written, created, directed, yada yada yada. There's black people in front of and behind the camera galore, and nobody in the cast has the Killmonger hair. And I feel like that's also important too, because it seems like when white people make these shows with black characters, it seems like the only hairstyle that they know when it comes to black men is the Killmonger hairstyle. You think about Acolyte, what's that show? Arcane. Miles Morales in the Spider-Man 2 video game has the Killmonger hair. And there's so many other characters throughout media they seem to give them the Killmonger hairstyle as if that's the only black hairstyle that they know. And that's not to say that there aren't black people that don't have that hairstyle, yes. But the fact that lately it seems like every black male character has that same hairstyle, whether it fits their character or not. Like the character from The Acolyte, the way he is as a person, it doesn't make sense for his hair, for him to have that hairstyle. He doesn't seem like a character that would have that hairstyle. And so you have this black show with black characters and black representation. Nobody has that hairstyle because, again, there are so many different black hairstyles and black hair and black representation. So that's something that I appreciated as well. But also, like, I do appreciate that despite the show only having 6 episodes and me probably feeling like Netflix maybe didn't have that much faith in it to give it more episodes, I will say that despite that, they still gave it a pretty decent budget for the 6 episodes that we got, because when you're dealing with, like I said, characters that have powers, the special effects were pretty good. The characters that have pyrokinesis, can teleport, telekinesis, turn invisible, etc., etc., etc. Like the effects of it were decent. Like it looked pretty good, and the action and the fights and the blood and all of that, like it looked great. The CGI looked good. Honestly, it looked a little bit better than a show that I also enjoyed that did have queer representation, Dead Boy Detective. If you haven't seen my review for Dead Boy Detective, I definitely recommend checking that out. But that was another example of, you know, black representation or queer representation. Yeah, they had a black character in Dead Boy Detective, but for the most part, like, it was mostly, you know, the show was queer, but it was mostly a white queer show. But I mentioned one of my big criticisms for that is like the special effects and CGI wasn't that good. And I also found out later on that it was originally made for the CW, I think, or a CW-like show. And I was like, oh, well, that kind of explained, because I was like, the special effects and CGI looked very CW. And they're finding out it was made for the CW, but then Netflix eventually bought it. I was like, oh, that makes sense. So hopefully for season 2, they increase the budget and we get better special effects. So I will say that the special effects on the black show was better than the special effects on the white show. But I had a good time with Supercell overall. Now, I will say, like, when you're dealing with the character that can travel back and forth through time, there is a moment and there are questions that I have in terms of like the consistency of it, because, and this isn't a spoiler, this is the same problem I used to have with like Hiro Nakamura. It's like, if you can go back and stop this and you can go back and prevent this, why can't you go back and prevent this? Why can't you do this? Why can't you stop that? Like, if you could do this and do like, or why is it that you can freeze everybody here, but you can't freeze everybody there? Like, so you have those moments with regards to this show here where it's like, oh, well, if you can do this, why can't you do that? And then it almost creates like moments where you're like, I feel like this is a plot hole, because why can't you stop? Like, this doesn't make any sense. And you have that issue. Anytime you inject any level of time travel in any story, you end up having those questions and having those issues. And I feel like that ends up happening here as well, where it's just like, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense, because then but it's like stuff you have to let go, stuff you have to like not think about too much. Because again, time travel always makes things way more complicated than it should be. And that's also why, in many ways, I kind of feel like when it comes to time travel, you should use it very sparingly, especially like you're giving a character that literally has the ability to time travel and do it all the time. So then you're always going to have those issues of then, why can't you do this? Why can't you do that? Why can't you stop this? Why can't you stop? But then if you have that, then there's no show, because if they can stop everything, then what's the point of there being, there's no conflict in that case. But last thing I'll say, even though I did enjoy how they fleshed out the characters and what they did in the time that they had with the 6 episodes, I will say, even despite that, because it is an ensemble cast, you still have certain characters that you don't really get a lot from. And I'll specifically say with the character of like Andre, you didn't really get a lot from the character of Andre. I wish I got to see more of the character of Sabrina and her sister, but they did give us a decent amount. But the show mostly focused on Michael and his relationship with his girlfriend Dion, and then another character that we focus on a lot, his name is Taser, because his character plays a lot into the main story as well. And so we got to see a lot of these 2 characters specifically, but the other characters, yeah, we got a decent amount of them, but they didn't focus enough on them. But it's only 6 episodes. We only got so much to do. I do wish that we at least got at least gave us 8 episodes. That seems to be the standard with a lot of shows, 8 episodes, even though I feel like 8 episodes is also never enough. Like, think about Avatar: The Last Airbender. That should have been at least like 12, 13, 14, 15 episodes. But I don't know why 8 episodes seem to be the standard, but yeah, it is what it is. But with that said, I enjoyed Supercell. I really hope we get a season 2 of Supercell. I hope season 2 gives us more than 6 episodes, and I hope it doesn't take 3, 4, 5, 6 years for us to get a season 2. But with that said, that's pretty much all I have to say. But what did you guys think about Supercell? If you haven't watched Supercell, go check out Supercell. 6 episodes, and then come back here and let me know all of your thoughts in the comment section below. But don't cut off this video yet, because I'm still talking, like I said, for the watch time. So with that, if this is one of your first time checking out one of my videos, please check out the other videos on my channel. If you like what you see, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button, and also like, share, comment, interact on this video for the all gay rhythm. Tell your friends, families, and neighbors about my channel to help me continue to grow. And also hit that bell notification button so you're alerted every single time I post a new video. And as always, I will catch you guys next time.